Well, there has been a lot happening in Afghanistan this morning. The Taliban is advancing on Kabul, and just within the last couple of hours, the reports came in that the Afghan president reportedly left that country. Taliban leaders are now demanding an unconditional surrender of the Afghan government, and embassies, including the U.S.'s embassy, are trying to get the diplomats and staff out of that area safely. Lots to talk about. So let's bring in Stephen Zunes. He's a professor in politics at USF, specializing in U.S. Middle East policy. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So let's talk about what's been happening over really the last week. Two parts to it, it seems. What's happening with the Taliban and then the speed at which it's happening.
Yes, the advance of the Taliban has even been more rapid than most of us expected. It's not, though, a strictly military thing. Let's keep in mind that the Afghan army has 4 times as many fighters as the Taliban. They've had over $100 billion of U.S. aid over the years. They've been trained by the most powerful armed force in the world. They have an air force, heavy equipment. The Taliban has none of that. And so the advance would seem to indicate that the problem is not primarily a military one, but a political one. That the corruption and the failures of the Afghan government just made it one that not enough Afghans are willing to fight for.
Well, and that's what makes I think that's what makes the conversation so complicated, right? You have former President Bush who called the withdrawal a mistake, saying, I think the consequences are going to be unbelievably bad. He said he was sad. It was President Bush, of course, that launched this war in Afghanistan in the wake of 9/11. And at the time, they said the goal was topple the Taliban-run government and target al-Qaeda. It's our longest war. So that brings in President Biden, who says he's not going to let a fifth president inherit Afghanistan 20 years later. You know, his argument, it's not our job to nation build. So a lot of finger pointing. Where does it sit in your mind of how this is being handled, whether it's political or military, and really how this goes forward?
Frankly, I don't know what the United States could do right now. Let's remember that President Trump was the one who originally signed the withdrawal agreement. U.S. troops were supposed to be out in May. Biden actually extended it. But, you know, to blame Biden for what happened in Afghanistan would be like blaming Gerald Ford for what happened in Vietnam. He was president at the time of the fall of Saigon. That the mistakes were actually made much earlier. And the fact that the United States, was, unwilling to really empower civil society, take a more bottom-up strategy. I mean, I've talked to quite a few Afghans, especially those in the large Afghan-American community in Fremont. A number of them are my former students. A number of them are parts of these old political families. And most of what they said to me is that the U.S. effort should have been only 10% military and 90% everything else. And instead, it was the other way around. And the development side wasn't about empowering civil society and building grassroots democratic institutions from below, but a very top-down kind of approach that just strengthened these corrupt elites and exacerbated the divisions within Afghan society.
Yeah, and so you're talking about mistakes that are being made and different presidents who have been a part of this discussion over the last 20 years. I guess, do you see a place where we should have said, the destination to which we're headed, and especially when you make a comparison of Vietnam to Gerald Ford, is this history repeating itself? Is that a fair comparison? And when should we have known, hey, we might want to switch things up in your mind as we teach what is happening here to people looking back 20 years?
Well, some of us were talking about this at the beginning. I even had an op-ed in USA Today almost exactly 20 years ago, pointing out that while we certainly have the right for targeted paramilitary operations to go after al-Qaeda, like we eventually did in killing Osama bin Laden in his sanctuary in Pakistan, that getting into a major ground war in Afghanistan would end in failure. And we find ourselves just in this kind of situation after years of sacrifice and a bloody counterinsurgency war. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of American hubris. Some of it comes out of a more kind of a imperialist kind of bent, you might say, of some elements, but I think much of it is out of a sincere liberal internationalism. But both are blinded by this idea that somehow if you have enough guns, if you have enough weapons, if you have enough troops, somehow we can control these tribal societies, which for centuries have resisted outsiders.
Well, what
Indeed,
happens?
Afghanistan's been called the graveyard of empires.
What happens, though, to the women, the girls? There's a lot of talk about that, and advocates saying that this is a dark future. I mean, in all of this, as we go back and forth and talk about, what should have been done, what could have been done, there is this what's next for women and girls specifically in that country who are in fear for what's next for them.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, it's hard to think about, and it's really it's unfortunate that this is happening so fast. So many of these people who might have been able to escape or find some alternative would be unable to do so. But it's also important to note that some of our allies, I mean, some of our such as the warlord Dahlstrom in the north and others, I mean, they imposed some very serious restrictions on women too. I mean, Afghanistan is already ranked near the bottom in the world in terms of women's rights. And obviously, it's going to get even worse in terms of with the Taliban in charge. And of course, if there is any way the U.S. or other countries can help evacuate people who are more vulnerable, I really think we should. But things are definitely going to get bad pretty quick. And I really hate to think what we're going to see. This is going to be far worse, I think, than when the communists took over South Vietnam in terms of the humanitarian consequences. And we know what happened in Vietnam was pretty bad, too.
Yeah, certainly a lot to talk about, a lot to think about, and a lot changing really every hour at this point in Afghanistan. Stephen Nunes, we have to leave it there. Stephen Zunes, who is the political science professor at USF, thanks for your insight and for the chat.
And my pleasure.
Wow. 20 years.